test. Okay, that works. Works the first time. All right, so this is all good. Oh, several things. I know. Is this the last class, or I think Wednesday is the last class? I don't think we have a dead day between the last day of instruction and the first day of final.
No, it's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that, but some universities like UC Davis, they have a dead week, so there's a week of time before the last day of instruction and the first day of exam, just so that there's some breathing room or study time between the last class of instruction and the first exam. So yeah, but I'm pretty sure the district doesn't have that here. In fact, sometimes it gets confusing. If you're taking both second 9-week classes and 16-week classes, the finals are all over the place, because with 8-week classes, the last class meeting is the final. But with full semester classes like this one, we have our exam during the final week. So it's all kind of slightly different depending on what classes you're taking. Okay. So this is all good. So let me show you something that I found over the weekend. I know it's not exactly related to this class, but I think it's interesting in many other ways. Digital whiteboard. Okay, so before I press the enter key, I think many of you already know what a digital whiteboard is. It's just basically a way for people to kind of write quote unquote on the whiteboard and be able to capture the content electronically, so that you can save it to a file, you can display on the computer screen and stuff like that. I mentioned this because it's a technology that we can probably incorporate into the new building, the building that is going to replace all of these classrooms. But the cost usually is pretty high. In other words, you have to spend $3,000 or $4,000 on something that is the size of a regular whiteboard, and in a few years it's going to be obsoleted, and you have to use newer technology. So here comes the inexpensive alternative to that type of technology. Now, I haven't really tried it out, but it looks like this type of wind. Okay, the screen is not optimized. Let me run the auto setup. Okay, so this is just a little wind thing that has like a few buttons, and one button probably is going to be the drawing part. And what it really is just a source of IR, infrared emission. So you will have to mount one component, like this component. It has to be mounted according to the website close to the projector. But I'm thinking it just has to have a good view of the screen area. And then the other component is just the handheld thing, and both of these are wireless. In other words, there's no wire going directly from any of these components directly to the computer. It's all wireless. And according to this, okay, people can draw pictures, on the projected image, and this thing can capture it, and then it can be displayed on the computer screen. And I think here's a demonstration of somebody demonstrating using that ability, pointing out where's the nucleus of a cell and stuff like that. And I can see how this can be potentially useful in a classroom, as an alternative to my document viewer. So instead of using a document viewer, people can possibly superimpose what you're drawing on top of other types of content. But the amazing part, I think, is it's only $170. Now, to individuals, $170 is quite a bit of money. I cannot spend that much money on equipment, just for the classroom myself. But for the college, it's not really that much money. Okay, and considering this is also really kind of flexible, it's portable. It's not like you have to mount something onto the wall, and it has to stay permanent. I think there's a lot of possibility here. So just kind of want to point out something that I discovered over the weekend. All right, so now we're back to app writing, and I'm pretty sure I tried to show you guys, but it didn't work last time, how to use JavaScript. Is that right? Okay. So I do want to kind of show you guys, at least, some of you may be interested if you already know, some JavaScript programming, or if you're interested in doing something that App Inventor is not particularly good at, but you know that JavaScript can do that type of back-end processing really efficiently. So that's kind of the focus of today's class. I'm going to App Inventor's website first. And I already have that web page done because I showed that to Bikram last time, and he is not here yet today. I'm pretty sure I used this account for that. And I'm gonna have to start up the AI starter. So I'm just going to use the old emulator, which seems to work fine. The problem with the new one is the new one doesn't work. For whatever reason, I cannot get onto the internet with the new emulator, but this one works just fine. So I'm going to stick with the old one for this particular demonstration. All right. So we'll start with looking at the help file, or the help from App Inventor itself, and then we'll go back to the code and then look at some demonstration. So the web viewer is the component that you need to use if you want to use JavaScript. And I know that it doesn't really seem to make any sense. Why would I need to use the web viewer, to run JavaScript? Well, that's because JavaScript is a programming language that is mostly on the client side. When I say client side, it means the web browser side. And as a web browser, the web viewer is a web browser. Okay, so that's why this is the component that we're going to look into. And when I click more information, it shows us a lot more detail of how to use a web viewer component, and particularly it just says component for viewing web pages. Okay, that's the main purpose of the web viewer component. We just need a magnifying here so that we can see a little better. So according to this, it's no big deal. It really is just a miniature web browser that you can integrate into a part of your application, which is kind of neat in a way by itself already, because you're basically incorporating a web viewer. So if you have content or document that you have already stored online, then you can use this component to display just general web pages. So which is already really cool, kind of useful. Okay. Sure. On the other hand, this is another reason, okay, being able to use JavaScript to run certain things is another reason why the web viewer component is actually useful. So in this case, the explanation is kind of, I would say it's on the light side. It doesn't really quite explain. It says right here, you can use the web viewer dot web view string property to communicate between your app and JavaScript running in a web viewer page. In the app, you get and set web view string. In the web viewer, you include JavaScript that reference the window.appInventor object using the methods and set web view string and then with some text. Okay, so this is all kind of cryptic. Okay, so I have a demonstration that shows you guys exactly what it does. And it is already right here. So let's go ahead and clean up the screen a little bit. This is the web viewer. The web viewer component itself, it is visible. Okay, it's not a web component where it is invisible. A web viewer is visible, and we should not confuse a web viewer with a web component, because a web component actually doesn't do this part. Okay, you need to use a web viewer in order to run JavaScript. Okay. So when you look into the resources of this particular application, there's this little test.html file that is a part of what we call the asset of this particular application. Now you can upload anything you want to. Generally speaking, people think of media as GIF files, JPEGs, PNGs, sound files, movie files, and stuff like that. Well, you can also upload just about any file that you want to, including HTML files. So in this case, I have an HTML file uploaded. And HTML stands for Hypertext Meta Markup Language. I always thought of M as meta, but it's actually markup. But when you look at this file, I can download it back to my computer, and just save it first into the temp folder. I'll just kind of briefly show you the content of this HTML file, which is, there's nothing fancy about it. So we'll go ahead and use a mousepad. There are other types of editors too, but this one works better in class. And just go to the temp folder and open that file. So go to the temp folder and open test.html. And this is the content of that test.html file. It doesn't do much, okay? So for the most part, we just have the usual stuff that an HTML file has, which is the HTML element itself. It starts all the way here and it ends all the way here. I don't even bother to specify anything with the head section of the HTML document. Nothing really to say about that. And the rest is the body of the HTML document, which starts here and it ends over here. Okay, this is just a header, to set the styles out test. And here's the script. Okay, this part is the actual script. So in the script part, the first thing I do is I declare a variable n, which is a random number. In other words, every time I run this script, it will give me a different number. Okay, well, hopefully it's a different number because random is supposed to be random. Okay, so this way I can tell whether the script is running again or not. Okay, because I want to be able to run the script on demand. I don't want it to just run. I don't want it to run just once and then not run anymore. The other two part is the actual important part. Now I haven't really incorporated the third part yet, but we'll go through these two first. Document.write is basically how you can tell JavaScript to generate quote-unquote output into the HTML document. And it's going to be generated in place, which means this portion of the HTML document, in other words, this section here, is going to be replaced by whatever we write in the script itself. So the first thing that I do here is to say, let's go grab whatever the web view string is from App Inventor and display it, first thing. And then the second thing is to display the random number itself, just as a confirmation that we do have a refresh of this particular screen. Now I haven't really put in the last component, which is changing web view string so that I can get a value back in App Inventor. Okay, so because the communication can go both ways. Okay, this time I'm only going in one direction, which is from App Inventor into JavaScript in a web viewer. Okay, so this is the content of the HTML document, and when we look into the actual blocks for this particular app, it's not doing much. First of all, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the component of the screen. Here's the web viewer component. It is visible. It just displays the content of an HTML file. There's a label. This is a text box, because eventually I want to integrate whatever is in the text box into the display in the content. The label itself is just a debugging purpose. It's only for debugging purposes. So for the demonstration I want to do right now, I'm going to disable the label. In other words, I'm not disabling, but I'm going to make it invisible, so it doesn't kind of interfere with the instruction here. So now that this label is no longer visible, I can type something here in the text box, and whatever content I type here, when I press the button, it will go into the web page. So I want to pass information that is in a text box of Web App Inventor into JavaScript running inside a web viewer. That's the first thing I want to demonstrate. And the blocks to do that is, I would say, fairly easy. Okay, I just have one button that does something. So this is what happens when the button is clicked. The first thing that I do is I grab the content of the text box and then set the web view string property of the web viewer into it. Okay. And then the second thing I do is changing the label. Since the label is no longer visible, that really doesn't matter. And this is the last thing that I do. Okay, I just set the web viewer home URL to a particular address, which is here, and that address is specifying it is a particular file, and it is inside the Android_asset folder, and the name of the file is test.html. I believe this method only works if the application is built as an APK. It does not work when you run it inside the AI companion, which also means that what I did earlier is not really particularly useful. So let me go ahead and change that part, which is this part here. I'm going to cancel this one. And what I will do is I'm going to run the emulator directly. And just wait for the emulator to start up. But as it is starting up, we can go back here and take a look at this code. Okay. So this is a one direction. We'll change it to the other direction later on. And let me see whether the emulator it's starting up. So it's time for me to go to the other folder to start up ADB. And then just check what devices we have. We do have the emulator already connected, and it's up and running. Okay. So now we can go ahead and install or build the app first. So let me go back to App Inventor, build the APK. And as App Inventor is doing this, let me just go take a quick look at JavaScript. And it shows you what JavaScript is. It's basically a standardized, or for the most part standardized, programming language for browsers. Okay, it runs on the browser side. And I'm going to save the file to the temp folder and then upload it to the emulator. Okay, so okay, there we go. So now back to the emulator. We can go to all the apps already installed here, and here's JS for JavaScript, and I run it. And there we go. So it says right here, hello, and then we have some kind of a random number and end here. Okay, so if you go back to the code of the JavaScript program, or excuse me, I take it back. When you go back to the test HTML file, we are seeing the hello. Okay, this is the first part, but we're not seeing anything before the hello. If you go back to the emulator, you can see that there's nothing before the hello here, and that's because the web view string is empty by default. Okay, so there's nothing being passed into the JavaScript as the web viewer is loaded the first time. So what I'm going to do next is to type something here, okay, and say this is new. This is new, and give it an exclamation point. Exclamation point. There we go. And then click the button. Okay, so as it seems like nothing has happened. That's because the keyboard is taking up too much space. But when you go back to the code here, okay, when you go back to not the code, but when you go back to the web viewer, we can see that this is new exclamation point is now before hello. And when you look at the random number, it is a different random number. So that means the script ran, and we had a refresh of the screen. And I can do this again. So every time I click the button, because the text inside the text box is the same, so that part did not change. But when I click the button, you can see the random number is changing. So that means the page is getting reloaded as I click each time I click the button. So are we doing okay so far with passing information from App Inventor into the JavaScript program? Okay. So let me see if I can explain this in a slightly different way using the document viewer, because I can then draw pictures and stuff like that. here's the document viewer. We just have to adjust. I'm doing a human zoom thing. There we go. Okay. I remember years ago there's a commercial for, this is back in the film camera days, and they were just starting to introduce a zoom lens on point and shoot cameras. And in the commercial they have a person using this super high tech point and shoot camera with a zoom lens, and then the other people did not have a zoom lens. So the people without a zoom lens, the person, the photographer, has to move back and forth to adjust for the frame. And then here's this person with a zoom lens, going like, see, I don't have to even move. I can zoom in and zoom out. And that was not even that far, that long ago. Maybe in the 90s. Okay, probably in the early 90s, people did not have zoom lenses on point and shoot cameras. And here we are 20-something years later. Okay, 20 years seems like a long time, but really is not a long time. And these days, we have zoom lens not only on our cameras, and who uses a camera these days anymore? Because most of your phones can shoot pictures of quality that is at least approaching point and shoot cameras already. And why do you want to bring an extra device when you don't have to? What really makes it interesting are people who use iPads as their cameras. So when they take a picture, it's really obvious because you can see the whole iPad, covering, like, yeah, it's still awkward to me. Some people may not feel that is kind of awkward, but I just think that's just kind of interesting. I'm just going to crank up the exposure, so now it is actually more of a white color. There we go. Okay, excellent. Okay, so we have two sides here. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line in between to separate which side is App Inventor. So this is the actual app side, App Inventor. And let's see, is it an E or not? Yep, it's an I, it's an O. Okay, I got it right. Okay, so here's App Inventor on one side, and here's JavaScript, or web, inside the web viewer on the other side. Okay, so we want to pass something from one side to the other side. On the App Inventor side, we have a text box. Okay, this is where you can interact very easily with the end user, and you can use any App Inventor component on this side. But sometimes when you want to process text and stuff like that, validate using regular expression and do all kinds of stuff, App Inventor doesn't have the tools to do that. Okay, so what happens is if you want to pass the text content, if you want to pass the text content to JavaScript to do some processing, the first thing you need to do is to go through the web view string. Okay, so you have to go through the web view string of the web viewer. So you first set the property of web view string of the web viewer component, and what that does is it will, and then the next thing is you want to change the home URL. So you want to change the home URL, which triggers an update of the web viewer screen. But this is being passed on to the other side as you set the web view string property. So on the other side, on the JavaScript side, it is known as document dot app inventor dot, and then depending on what you want to do with it, it can go in one of two directions. If you want to just see the content, then you use get web view string. I'm going to abbreviate here, web view string. If you want to change it, then you use set web view string. Is that okay so far? So now, if you want to pass it back to the other side, the set web view string will change the property. So when JavaScript is done running on the web viewer, this, whatever the value of the web view string is now going to be passed back into App Inventor, and it's going to change a web view string, the property called web view string of the web viewer itself, but that is visible to the rest of your App Inventor components. So now you have a way to do the full cycle. You can pass something into JavaScript, do some processing, and then pass it back to App Inventor. So that gives you a lot of flexibility, because as a programming language, App Inventor is not bad. I would say it gives you a lot of flexibility. It has all the control structures that is found in just about any other programming language. It has got procedures, subroutines, and stuff like that. But it is not the best. Okay, it doesn't give you a rich library of functions that can do text processing of all kinds already. Okay, so what I want to do is to show you what you can possibly do with JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is an interesting quote-unquote programming language because it crosses over between actual code development, like programmers do that, but it also crosses over to our new media people. Okay, I'm not sure whether you guys are doing it or not. Do you have to learn JavaScript or not yet?
It's more of MelScript, but it's a variation of Java.
Okay. Is it used for user interaction, or is it mostly just for backend processing?
Backend processing.
Backend processing. Okay, but you guys have to do some programming using a JavaScript-based language.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So it does cross over. JavaScript, started off as a client language on the browser, but because of its wide acceptance of use in browsers, it is now permeating into other types of applications. So let's take a look at JavaScript, and particularly I want to look at regular expression, or otherwise known as regex. And we'll take a look at the reference document here. Now, regular expression is something that seems to be kind of odd to most people, okay? But it is a very important part of validation. So what I have here is, okay, so a pattern looks kind of like this, okay? It's just traditional to use a slash to delimit or to start and end a string. And then the last part here, the I, is a modifier, which can specify one of these three things. You can basically do regular expression being case insensitive, so uppercase A would match a lowercase a. You can do a global search rather than stopping at the first match, because the default behavior is it will stop on the first match. M is to perform multi-line matching, which means it will consider the text, which can potentially have multiple lines, as one just really long string. So you can now start to look for the beginning of a line, look for the end of a line, and stuff like that. So these three are just modifiers. Brackets is how we can specify a range of characters. In other words, you can say, okay, what am I looking for here? Well, we're looking for a particular character that is one of these, okay? So if you want, just ABC to match a particular character, you just use ABC inside square brackets to basically mean, okay, it can be any one of these three characters, but nothing other than these three. The caret symbol ahead of a bunch of characters means not one of those. Okay, so in this case, you're negating it, which means anything other than ABC is a match. You can use a dash to specify a range. So 0-9 means any digit is going to match any digit at this location. And once again, you can use a caret to mean the negation, which basically means in this case it means it is anything other than a digit. Parentheses is used for several purposes. These are round parentheses. They can be used to specify alternatives. It can also be used for grouping. So it has multiple purposes. A meta character is basically, it is not a character. In other words, when you specify a dot or a period, it is not matching a period. A period actually means any character, but only one. A \W does not actually mean a backslash followed by a W. It means a word character, which is A to Z lowercase or A to Z uppercase. and backslash uppercase W is a non-word character, and so on. These are basically here because it is just good for shorthands. In other words, backslash D is nothing more than just square brackets, and inside you specify 0-9. But it is easier for some people to type backslash D. I personally prefer the square bracket notation just so that I can tell right away what it is. But I guess people who memorize this table can make it more concise to specify exactly the same thing. All right, so we have a whole bunch of stuff like this, and then we have quantifiers, which specifies n plus means n is any type of pattern. It can be an actual character, can be a range, can be a backslash D, can be any one of those, and it can also be in parentheses. So plus means we need at least one occurrence of whatever is specified before the plus. And then an asterisk means can have any number, including 0. So the only difference between a plus and an asterisk is with an asterisk, n can be missing, and it will still be considered quote-unquote a match. And question marks means 0 or 1. So in other words, it's saying n is optional, but if you have it, it will only match once. In curly braces, you can specify the number of occurrences. So if you only have one number like x, it means we need exactly x many occurrences. But you can also specify a range, which is x, y. That specifies any number of occurrences between x and y is considered a match. If you specify x and then a comma, it means at least x occurrences. A $sign it marks the end of a line, and a caret marks the beginning of a line. Question mark equals n matches any string that is followed by a specific string n. Okay, that one I did not know. Learned something new. Okay, and this is how you can use a regular expression. So with regular expression, you can now specify and say exec, which is testing for a match in a string, returning the first match. Test is to see whether there's a match or not. It only returns either true, yes, there's a match, or no, there's not a match. And then toString returns the string value of the regular expression, which is basically just for displaying purposes. So that's how regular expressions are useful for. So test and exec are the most important part. So let's just take a quick look at test. And this is a test code to specify how to use regular expression to match something. So we have the string that is being tested, which is called the best things in life are free. And then the pattern that we're trying to match, which is a regular expression, is simply E. So what that means is we're just trying to match E. Is there a E in the string, the best things in life are free? And the answer is yes. Okay, so RES is just the result. So when this is all done, RES would have a value of true. Okay, which hardly describes why we need regular expression. So what we'll do, what I will explain next using the document viewer, is to give you some examples of useful regular expressions that you might find, hey, this is actually kind of handy. I might want to learn how to do some programming in JavaScript, if not for anything else, just for regular expression and validation. So let me switch back to the document viewer. And we'll start with something that we already know, like phone numbers, okay? So if you want people to enter a phone number in a particular format, okay, because that's the way you expect it and you want a uniform way of representing phone numbers. So let's just say that you want a phone number to be, 123-456 and then 7890. In other words, you want 3 digits followed by a dash and then 3 more digits, another dash, and then 4 more digits. Okay, so let's just say that this is what you want. So the way you can specify this is a \D to specify digit, and then you specify exactly 3 of those. So in curly braces, you specify a 3. So that means I want exactly 3 digits to begin with. If you really want to mark the beginning of the whole thing, you can use a caret to basically say I want to match. This has to be the beginning. There cannot be any empty spaces at the beginning of a phone number. And then a dash by itself is okay, it is just a dash. And then you have backslash D in curly braces 3 again for the next 3 digits. And then you also have another dash and then backslash D in curly braces 4 to match the last 4 characters. Now if you want to specify there can be nothing else following this, no extensions, nothing like that, you can put a $sign here. So that means I need to have an exact match of 3 digits, a dash, 3 more digits, another dash, and then 4 more digits. And this is the only thing that I can match in a phone number. Now, is it too restrictive? I cannot judge that, okay? I'm just saying that if that is what you want to match, this is the regular expression that you can use to check that. Is that okay? What about something a little bit more complex? What about zip code, okay? Because sometimes people can enter a zip code, just the 5 digits. Other times they can do the 5 plus 4. So if you want that to be an option, this is how you do it. So you can specify backslash D, caret to mean the beginning, and then backslash D 5 in this case to means the first 5 digits are mandatory. It's not optional. And then in parentheses, you can now specify the part that is optional. So now you can say take it back, a dash first, and then a backslash D in curly braces 4, and curly braces close parentheses. So I'm grouping the dash and then followed by 4 more digits to be optional. But in order to express this part is optional, that we can have 0 or 1 occurrence, you can specify in curly braces 0, comma 1, but it is just more handy to specify a question mark to mean the previous thing can occur 0 or 1 time, and then the $sign to mark the end of the whole thing. So now you can match a zip code with or without the extra 4 digits. Now it doesn't really check whether it is a valid zip code or not. You probably have to go through web resources to double check on that one, but at least it can check whether the format of the zip code is correct or not. Are we kind of doing okay so far with understanding at least what regular expressions can do? So here's my challenge. Try to do this without JavaScript. Try to do this all in App Inventor blocks. You can do it, okay? Nothing says you cannot do it. It's just a lot harder, okay? And doing it in JavaScript is like that. Do we have any questions about this? No particular questions? Okay. So let's go ahead and check and see whether we can get this to work or not, okay? So we want to be able to enter a particular string in the text box, pass it into JavaScript, have JavaScript to test whether it works or not, and then reflect the result back in web view string as a result, okay? So we're going to do all of this stuff here inside JavaScript. So once again, we switch back to this code here. This is it's a template of what we need to do. The string itself is going to be passed in by web view string itself, and then the pattern is something that we do have to specify in the HTML document, and then the result is going to be also be used to set the web view string, so that when the script is done, we can check back and see what is the actual result. And there's a certain trick to that part as well. I'll show you guys what I mean by that. Okay, so we go back to the the HTML document because we want to change it to incorporate this part here. So we go back to this part here, and we don't need to use the random number and stuff like that anymore. So we're going to get rid of this stuff here. In fact, I'm going to change the name or change the header to say check zip code validity. Okay, validate zip code. Validate zip code. There we go. And we no longer need an n as a number, so we'll just get rid of this part here. We do need the regular expression, so we'll say regular expression is new regular expression. And in here, we'll specify exactly what we talked about a little bit earlier, which is backslash D in parentheses 5, and then in parentheses, we specify a dash backslash D 4, and then in curly braces specify 4, and then outside of the pair of parentheses, we specify question mark. Oh, I forgot the beginning and the end. So here's the beginning, and here's the end. Okay. So this is the regular expression, which is replacing the really simple example here, E. Okay. And just to make things really clear, okay, the test string is window.appInventor.getWebViewString. And I made a mistake earlier. I said this document is actually window. So now the test string is what App Inventor is passing in through WebViewString. And I want another one to store the result. Okay, so here's result, which is going to be copied from this code here. It's just your pattern.test, and then with whatever string we are testing it on. Okay, so we say your test string, regular expression, dot test, and then the test string itself. There we go. Okay. So in this case, I am going to pass the result back to App Inventor by setting WebViewString. So I have window.appInventor dot set WebViewString, and then in there I specify result. Okay. So here we have a program or a JavaScript that doesn't do anything at all. As far as the display is concerned, it will only say validate zip code. It doesn't even tell you what zip code is validating. Now, if you want to show what code is validating and whether it's valid or not, fine, we'll just do a bunch of document right here. Okay, so we can say document.write, and we can say validating, and then the string that we're actually validating, which is called test string. And then on another line, okay, we can do a break here. So on another line, we can now specify the actual result. Okay, so we can say result is, and then the result string is here. All right. So we can now display the actual result, on the web page itself, which is kind of optional. That's not really the main point. Save the document. Go back to App Inventor, which is right here. And we have to change the document, so we have to go back to the designer. Get rid of the file that is already inside the App Inventor project, delete it, and then re-upload it, because you cannot just upload and overwrite an existing resource. You have to delete it first, which is kind of inconvenient, but it's not too bad. So now we have a new document already loaded here, and then I'm also going to change the blocks to reflect the result in App Inventor. Okay, so there's a trick here. The label is not going to be set here. Instead, I am setting the label as the last thing to reflect the result of the operation. So it's no longer setting to text textbox1.text. Instead, we are going to use the WebViewString after that. Okay, and we'll probably see a problem, okay, which is expected, but we'll find out how to fix that problem. So we want to refer to WebViewString, which is this thing here, and just say, okay, show me the actual WebViewString after we change the home URL of WebViewer, which triggers the JavaScript to run and see whether it is correct or not. Okay, so this is now my new application. I think we are ready to go. So rebuild the APK file so I can re-upload it. Are there any questions about this whole thing? Yep.
If you're going to enter in a 5-digit number, the button, then true should show up in the web view, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So this is a really kind of useful tool for those of you who want to kind of be able to validate the text input of something and don't want to write all that validation code in blocks in App Inventor, which you can. It's just really painful to do that. Okay, so we'll go back to text window here, reinstall the application. And now it's reinstalled. Let's start it again. Okay, it's because when it first loads, it's already trying to validate something, but it's empty. So we want to give it something actual to validate. So we'll give it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which should be considered valid. Click it. And it says validating, but the result is false. Darn. Okay, so that means if I put a dash, it's probably not going to work either. So I have to debug the regular expression itself. There we go. Click. Still not considered valid. Okay. So now we have to fix the JavaScript because this is why it's not showing as correct. Now the other thing I want to show you, okay, it's not going to work because I turned it off already, because I turned off the label, the visibility of label. So I have to turn it back on for one thing. And we'll go ahead and delete the text, the test.html file, and then go back here and see what I have just done wrong here. Let's see if it is just having too much stuff here. I'm going to remove the beginning and the end so we can be matching somewhere in between. And going to reread this part here. Okay, so the other quick way to specify a pattern is to use the slash notation. As opposed to using this particular method. Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and save this file and re-upload it into App Inventor. Now we're going to rebuild the APK file. Has anyone checked out the gallery inside App Inventor just to look at the projects that other people have done a little bit? Okay. It is slow.
Must be a lot of other people online.
Well, I have no idea. It won't help if I just refresh the screen. We'll just start the whole process all over again, so that's not going to help. All right, so let's switch back to here and re-upload the file. Because by default it doesn't do multi-line, and if it doesn't do multi-line, the caret and the dollar sign may not work. So let's check. So it's JS. It will first say false anyway because the string is empty to begin with. So now we can specify an actual string 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's still saying it is false. And you can also see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the label itself, which is not reflecting false. And that's because the time it takes to execute the code inside the web viewer is asynchronous to to the app inventor block itself. Okay, so we have two problems. Well, one problem I know how to fix. This one is just kind of weird that it's not validating it. Okay. So when something like this is not working, what would you do? Make it simpler. So instead of specifying this entire thing, I'll just say, okay, let's forget about the optional part. We'll just do the first 5 digits. And we have to let me see if I can just upload a new file of the same name and see if it will ask me, do you want to overwrite that file that is already in there? A file named test.html already exists. It knows, do you want to remove the old file? This will also remove any other file whose name is conflicting with test.html. Okay, if I click yes, it will remove it. So the question is, did it upload it after removing? You think so? I'll double check. We'll save it under a new name, so this way we can differentiate between the two. And then inside the text editor, which is this part here, we say File, New Window, and this time we load the new file. Oops. Go. Test1.html, and it is the new one. Okay, so we have confirmation. That's good to know. And then we go build again. And meanwhile, since this is going to take a while, I'm going to go back and read the documentation. Yep.
Can you go back to your HTML file really quick?
Yeah.
Okay. After that, after the 5, if you put a --d, and then you open the curly brackets forward, close them, and then you put a $, it should work.
Okay. Well, since I have already built the APK at this point, I'm just going to test it, just for 5 digits and see whether it works or not. Because the parentheses may be the one that is throwing off the pattern matching. All right, so this is all done. Go back and run JS again. This time we just specified your 5 digits.
Oh, and also you have to on the actual code, the reason why it is returning false is because you also have to have the backslash on both sides.
The backslash?
Yeah, the one that's over.
You mean the slash?
Yeah, the one that's under the one that's under the
You mean like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to have that for the regular expression.
Okay. Yeah, because the okay, all right. So we'll specify it like this then. So okay. Because the JavaScript documentation, included both types of specification. So we'll test this one too.
At least that's what I was told by Carol Lieber.
Okay.
Shouldn't it be in quotes?
No.
Because it was
No.
assigned it was, even though it had the side or the slashes, it was still in quote.
Not in these examples.
Oh, I see now. Okay.
Yeah, in these examples, when you use the slash notation, you don't need the quotes anymore.
Oh, okay.
It's a super shorthand of the other way, but the question is, is this really equivalent to the other one? Because in the first example, it uses this format, which does not use the slashes at all. So we'll test it again. I think I got it uploaded here already, so we can just rebuild the application. And we'll go find some more examples like JavaScript, regular expression examples.
Do you have your email open?
My email?
Yeah.
Why?
I'm gonna send you the link for one that.
Okay. All right. So we should have the app reinstalled. Anytime now. That is taking way too long. Okay, let's do one more time.
I just sent you a link that showed you the regular expressions for zip code.
Okay. Well, I can't check email, during this time, but I can do this.
It's the first link right there. Down.
It has one extra backslash at the front.
That's the back cut. You want to go down to the solution.
That's escaping this slash, I think. But the second one does not escape the second one, so that won't work.
Posing the question.
Yeah, so it should be like this. Yep, there we go.
In case you go further down,
Uh-huh.
it shows you it shows you the different expressions you can use for the it shows you for the
Well, when you use the slash notation, I don't think you need a double slash. When you use the slash notation to start the search pattern, I think that's when you do not need the double backslash. Okay, so let's check. Oh, on the it's not installing the app. Alrighty. That is not good. Okay. Let's close the emulator, start it again. But this is not nearly as frustrating as having to fix a PC running Windows 7. It got to a point where the updates don't work anymore. Every single time I try to update it, it will say, update has failed, reverting back to the original configuration. And that's after trying to apply like 170 updates. And when it reverts, it will try again with exactly the same updates, which will fail again and then go back to the original one. So I searched online to find out, how to do that. And then what I found was most people just say, oh, you just want to turn off the automatic update, and every single time, you just select 10 based on the KB number. Select only 10. Try to install those. If it's successful, move on to the next 10. And with 170 updates, that's gonna take like a few days to go through all the reboots and whatnot. So I would call that kind of annoying. There we go. So let's try that one more time. Okay. So we'll try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has to do with the backslashes, whether they should be escaped or not. There we go. Result is true. So that means over here with Stack Overflow. Okay, so Stack Overflow, you kind of take that stuff with a grain of salt. So I can either use this format or I can use the other one. But if I use double quotes to enclose a string, then every single backslash has to be double backslash, because you have to escape the backslash itself when it is in double quotes. But when it is not in double quotes, this will work now. I'm pretty sure. I'm overflowing with self-confidence now. So we'll put everything back in here. There we go. Save the file. But this is the whole process of learning how to use a new programming language or a new specification or new whatever. Just it's a lot of testing involved. There we go. And it's taking its sweet time. Well, as App Imperator is taking its sweet time to do this, is there anything else that you think JavaScript can do that can potentially be useful to a mobile app? Interacting with PayPal.
I was going to suggest that if you have a drawing surface, you can use JavaScript to control some graphics drawing.
But then the interaction will become kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. That part will become difficult.
If you're just going to do something that was passively viewed.
Right. Exactly.
Animation.
Yep. That certainly is one of those things that you can do with it. But anytime you want interaction, then it gets kind of tricky, because the only way for your web viewer to pass information back out is to go through web view string. And that only gets updated after a certain amount of time. So let me just check this one first.
And it relies on internet access too, so if you don't have a connection.
Well, this is all internal.
Okay.
This document is included as a part of the application, so it's not like that. So we put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that should validate. Yep. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a dash. 1, 2, 3 should not validate because I'm missing one of the digits. False. Okay. Very good. And if I add one more digit, that should validate again. Yep. So it's all working. Excellent. However, we do have a problem because I want the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dash 1, 2, 3, 4, which is right above the text box itself, to be reflecting the result of the test and not the string to be tested. Okay, that part is still not working. And the reason why it is not working has to do with the JavaScript is running quote unquote asynchronous to the blocks in App Inventor. Now, what I mean by that is basically saying when we execute this block, it triggers the web viewer to run whatever code is inside the web, the HTML document. But before that is all done, it moves on to the next block. So by the time we get to this block here and take a look at the web view string of the web viewer, the web viewer JavaScript may not be done yet. So as a result, we are seeing something that is not updated. This is the old value, which is the text or the string to be tested, not the result of the test. Is that okay? All right. So how do we get the actual result? I mean, if this is not getting us the result, we need some other way to get a result. So what I'll do is I'm going to include an interface using, I'm just going to be cheap here and use the same button. And this time I'll use a long click to force the label to be updated to web view string. So I'm going to use a long click to repeat this block here and say, okay, let's update it again. Even though I'm not running a new instance of the web viewer, I'm going to check the string again. Every time I long click on the button, it's going to do that. So this way I have a way to double check and say, okay, is it updated now? Or is it never going to be updated? So once again, we build it. And all of this stuff here is not really documented in this documentation here. It doesn't say anything about, oh, okay, when do you get it back? Well, you just get it back when it's done. When is it going to be done? How do I know it's done? It doesn't say anything. So a lot of this, is kind of trial and error because, just because the documentation is not, specifying one way or another. And this is, this really kind of divides, the developers into two different kinds. There are developers who, when they have to do something like this and the documentation does not fully describe how it works, some people just get stumped and get discouraged and feel kind of really discouraged. Other people get all kind of excited and go like, okay, let's find out how this works. Let's take it apart. All right, so let's go back and test it again. Okay, so we'll use the same stuff to test it, except this time the long press of a button will actually do something different, because it will actually go ahead and update the web view string on the label by forcibly. Okay, so done, press it, it is true. Okay, so now I'm going to long press the button. And you can see the result is now updated, which means it is updated. It's just that by the time, okay, let me go back to the blocks here so this way I can better explain it. So the point is, if I go back to the blocks here, by the time I get to this block here, it has not been updated yet. It is after a while, okay, we don't know exactly how long is a while, but after a while when I do the long click and I do exactly the same block again, then it reflects the result. That's because the two things are going on in parallel. The JavaScript is running at the same on one hand, and then the blocks are running on the other hand. So depending on which one is done faster, you may not get to the result right away. So this is one of the problems of this approach. It's like, okay, when am I getting the result? When am I getting the result? When am I getting the result? Okay. So there are ways to kind of, quote unquote, get around this problem. You can do it with one way or another way. One way is to use the timer. Okay, you just kind of guesstimate and say, I'll give this 200 milliseconds. Or every 200 milliseconds, I'll check and see whether it's done or not. So that will not incur as much overhead because you're not busy waiting and you're not just checking the result over and over again. The other way is to put in a loop and say, I'm not going to move on until I get a result from the JavaScript. Because the JavaScript is supposed to reply with only either true or false. So you can tell whether it's done or not. Okay? So it's up to you to decide which way you want to go if this is what you plan to do with your application. So I'll show you both ways to do it. Okay? So instead of doing this block here, let's toss it away. Because we don't want to have the end user to check it again and again and again. So what we'll do is we're going to use a loop here and say, are we done here? Are we done here? Are we done here? And we'll keep asking until it is done, which is not good for battery life because this is going to be, it will take time. This will consume time or execution time. So we're going to do something like this, okay? Which is, once again, not a good thing to do if you want to conserve battery life. So we want to do a test, and as long as the test is true, we stay in the loop. So what we want to do here is to go to logic, and specify a, let's see, we want it to be, if it's not, and it is not, so we want an and here, and then we want to use a text string batching and specify not equal to and not equal to here. So we replicate this block, well, too early, but that's okay. Specify not equal to, oh, it doesn't even have not equal to, so I don't want to do it this way. Let's toss this, that's my trash can. Too many scroll bars. Okay, toss this away. All right, another scroll bar, jeez. All right, so now we want to go back to logic again. So I can only check equal to, so we have to do a not first, and then do a or, and then we can check for equal in both cases, which is kind of a pain, but we can do it. Duplicate, stash it over here, and we'll take the web view string and say the web view string can be true or it can be false. And let me just test, double check again how it's spelled. Lowercase, uppercase, that's kind of important. So lowercase true, lowercase false. Okay, that's what we're looking for. So we can specify lowercase true or lowercase false. Okay, so copy this function here, and then specify another string over here. So we had, do we have true already or false already? That's true, so we now specify false. There we go. All right. So this is a really kind of long thing, but basically it's saying, as long as the web view string is not true or false, keep waiting. Okay, and I don't even bother to do anything in here. Now if you want to, you can update like a counter on the screen. I'm not even sure whether it will update the actual screen or not, but you can do something here like a progress bar or something. And you might want to put a counter to and say, okay, I will only do this loop like 200 times. If it doesn't get done in 200 times, I will exit anyway and just time out and say, okay, something is wrong with the JavaScript. In other words, you want to prepare for the cases where, okay, bad things are happening and it's not as expected. Okay, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to use this approach. So I'm waiting until it's all done, and then I reflect the actual result in here. So we'll build the app again and see if it works. And this is, by the way, not the preferred way of doing things, because this is doing what we call busy waiting or polling, which consumes battery life. But it is easier to code because you don't have to use a timer, and as a result, a lot of programmers do things like this, because it's quote unquote easier. But the end result is your app is going to be consuming more battery life, and just not a generally speaking, not a good approach. So we'll save the file again, overwrite, re-upload. Now, if you need to go interact with some external websites, JavaScript can save you a lot of time, because a lot of times people have written sample code or templates already or libraries already to do that sort of thing. So we'll try it one more time and just specify 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can see, oh, okay, press the key. And this time it won't do anything until it's done, so I don't have to long press again. So it does work, okay? It's just that as a general programming approach, this is not a good one. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? Any questions about the rationale of, hey, why is it even important to run certain code in JavaScript? Or how do we do this? How do we pass something into JavaScript to process, and how do we get a result back in App Inventor. This is okay so far? Okay? All right. So next what we'll do is to find out, okay, what else can we do with JavaScript in addition to regular expression? So let's just say that you want to interface with something that is already well known to be a web resource, okay? So let's say we want to look up maybe PayPal, okay? So we say PayPal, and we want to look into JavaScript API, Application Program Interface. So we build a customized login with PayPal button. And if I just kind of skip a little bit here, do you see anything here that might be related to what we are currently talking about? Let me just zoom in, so this will become kind of obvious. There we go. What do we see here? We see the use of JavaScript, and right here, okay, let me just kind of briefly explain what it is. So the first part here, this part here, is just basically saying, okay, there's a bunch of code already written, okay? PayPal has already written this code here, and I'm just going to say, okay, include that code into this particular web viewer, okay? And as long as it is written in a compliant JavaScript format, web viewer should not have a problem reading it, okay? So this part should work just fine, even in your own script as an HTML document. So the focus is now on the other side, or basically the following part of this code, which is starting here and ending here. So this code here is basically making use of something that is already defined by PayPal, and it's using the login. Now, in this case, the login is not going to work. This part is not going to work because we don't have that as an element. But that's okay because you're going to pass it in using web view string. Okay, so you're going to have the login name and the password as elements or as components of your application itself. So you pass in the login, you pass in the password, and then you grab it from web view string, and then you'll specify all this code here. And well, this is really just going to the website, so people can now interact inside the web viewer with PayPal. So you don't have to bother with dealing with PayPal. Now, relating this back to what we talked about in the previous class, you might have an issue with this because if your application has in-app purchase, you might need to declare that first when you publish your application. And Google may not want you to use PayPal for in-app purchases because Google has its own payment interface, and that sort of interface makes money. So Google may have a problem and say, okay, you're not supposed to use PayPal. But this code is, this is just an example. Okay, it's just an example of what you can do with this. Any other questions? Do you guys remember Firebase? Okay, so let's look it up. Let's look up JavaScript, Firebase, and see if there's any type of interface. Firebase.com, remember this is a part of Google already. JavaScript API. So there you go. So now you can interface directly with Firebase inside JavaScript. So if the Firebase component of App Inventor is too primitive, is too restrictive, you cannot do what you want to do with Firebase, knock yourself out in JavaScript. Are we doing okay so far in terms of understanding how this can potentially expand the capability of your app, especially the back end, quite significantly? Now, if there are certain things you want to render in the web page, because it just looks better on the web page, you can have better format control and stuff like that, but you want everything passed back into App Inventor eventually, you can do that too. because what you can do is to run the web page and have someone to click a button on the web page itself, but upon clicking the button, it will set the web view string into a format that your application can recognize. Then your app can pick it up and say, oh, okay, I can see that you have just entered something here and something here, but then you can use everything in HTML to specify how you want someone to input a form and stuff like that. Yes, Becky.
Okay, so question I have for you is this. Let's say that you have a document that's got a username with a password.
Okay.
Right?
Uh-huh.
That you've uploaded.
Yep.
If you actually want
Both of them to be passed back to your application?
no, like okay, so the question is that if you actually want the application, because when you have a login screen and you type in username and password.
Okay, so the login screen is in App Inventor.
Yes, it
Okay.
is an app inventor. You have got a document that's got multiple usernames and passwords.
Okay, what kind of document are we talking about?
Like a text document.
A text document, okay.
Yeah, that's got multiple username and passwords.
Okay.
Would you have to hard code every single one of those usernames into the system, saying, okay, if the username is this and password is this?
Yeah, you
go to the
kind of
screen?
have to do it that way, and it also makes it impossible to create new users that way.
Yeah.
So if this is a real app, what you want to do is to store the username and password on a server in the cloud, somewhere, and then use, SQL query and whatnot to interact with the database. Now, MySQL does not work well in App Inventor, but since you can do JavaScript, now, you have all kinds of possibilities open. Because, then it becomes just a matter of looking up MySQL, JavaScript. Okay, this value. There we go. Cannot directly connect to MySQL as is a client. Okay, but you can use RESTful API.
Yeah, you can.
There are tons of ways to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not going to be a major
You
issue.
can also use PHP and also.
Well,
a-
PHP is on the other side, but in JavaScript, you can open a connection directly to the
Yeah,
database.
you can using. I think it's using ASP. I think.
Yeah, but there are ways to do it in JavaScript. So now basically you're bypassing App Inventor to directly interact with some kind of database backend. So the only tricky part is how do you pass information into, and how do you get something out of your JavaScript.
Yeah, because in JavaScript to convert to SQL, you have to use Ajax.
Ajax?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Ajax is JavaScript.
Yes, but it's on the server side of JavaScript. I think.
Let me just look up here. Just add API to it. Okay. I hesitate to click on the Stack Overflow, but here we go. Okay, JavaScript cannot directly connect to MySQL, but you can mix JS JavaScript with PHP to do so.
I do have the code for it from Carolina.
I would kind of disagree because I think with JavaScript, if you can open ports or you can communicate using a socket, which I know you can do,
Yeah, you can use
then
it.
you can work directly with a database. It's just that most servers do not want to expose the MySQL port itself because that's really kind of dangerous. So that's why most people want to go through a PHP script to interact with MySQL. And just to complete this discussion, just so that we have it on record. So what I'm talking about here is like this. Okay, so this is your App Inventor app. Okay, so AI app here. Okay, so this is the mobile device, and this is the cloud or internet, and on the other side you have your server. So let's say this box is representing your server. What you do not want to do is to expose MySQL or any type of database directly through a port to the to the cloud or to the internet, because this means anyone, including hackers, can directly go through the database port and try to hack into your database. So this is not a good idea, even though it's possible. Now, if that port is available, JavaScript can open a port directly to MySQL and then start to do queries and interpret the results and stuff like that. It can do it, okay? But since this is not usually recommended, so what people usually do is to hook up MySQL internally to Apache or some kind of web server, and then Apache will run a PHP script or Perl script, whatever you want to do. Okay, you can do Perl, PHP, Python, whatever. But the script itself is going to go through the usual port, 443, because you want it to be secure, especially when you're dealing with login, logout, that type of thing. So that means your port 443, which is the secure port of HTTP, can now be hooked up to App Inventor. But instead of using App Inventor itself to talk to a web page, because it's not easy to interpret the results when you're looking at an HTML document. So now on this side you can have JavaScript inside the HTML document. So your app, your components will trigger the execution of JavaScript inside an HTML document, and that in return goes through the internet to talk to your database. So in one way, it goes in this direction, it makes a query, and then when you get a result, then the only part that is kind of tricky is this interface here is all done by web view string. Web will view string. So that's the only interface to go into your JavaScript and out of your JavaScript. But as long as you know how to do that,
yeah.
Hey, it's easy. And we already covered a particular topic that makes this easier to deal with. So if your AI application has multiple things to pass into the JavaScript, you can do JSON encoding. So now you can have a list of stuff that you can put into your JavaScript. And do you think on the JavaScript side it's easy to decode JSON? And by the way, how do we spell JSON?
JSON.
It's JSON. And what do you think the JS stands for?
JavaScript.
JavaScript. So do you think JavaScript has a problem with interpreting JavaScript object notation? No. So there you go. So use JSON to encode a whole bunch of stuff into a single string, put it into your web view string, run your script in JavaScript. Okay? Now if there are multiple results that you need to pass back into App Inventor, encode everything into JSON again, put it into, use set web view string, put it into a single string, and then go back to your App Inventor side, and then use a JSON decoder, which is a part of the web component, not the web view component, to decode it back into multiple parts on the list. Then you're all set. So now we have a pretty clean and flexible interface between App Inventor blocks and JavaScript. And then from JavaScript, you can do whatever you want. And then you can pass the result back into App Inventor. So I know this is kind of like way advanced compared to the actual curriculum of this class. But it does make your JavaScript, excuse me, I take it back. It does make App Inventor far more capable than most people think it is. So I just want to kind of push this out, in the second last class, just so that if you want to continue to write, to develop your App Inventor app, you know that you're not going to run out of gas that quickly. I mean, because you can rely on JavaScript to do the heavy lifting when it comes to actual coding and logic and stuff like that. All right, are we doing okay or not? Good. All right. So I'm going to stop the recorder, and I'll open up to. I'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll open up to like questions regarding project, your final project, and stuff like that. I'm hoping that you guys have been working on the project. It's close to completion, if not already done. I know some people are pretty much already done. If you're starting right now, you really kind of have to kind of catch up. But I think most people are well into the development phase and not have a lot of problems. So if you do have questions, I'll answer those questions after about 10 minutes. I will take a short break, and then we'll address those questions.